High school lockdowns are usually treated as drills or temporary measures, but sometimes, the reality behind those lockdowns is more terrifying than we could ever imagine. Tonight, I'm going to share with you 3 true stories of high school lockdowns that turned into the stuff of nightmares. I still remember the chill in the air that morning, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones even though it's not snowing. It was mid-February, and the sky was a dull gray, the kind of day that just feels off even before anything happens. I was a sophomore at Westbrook High School, a mid-sized school in a sleepy town that didn't see much excitement, at least, not the kind of excitement we were about to get. That morning started like any other. I got to school around 7:30 a.m. Dragging my backpack through the slush that was left from a storm earlier that week. My best friend Kyle met me by my locker, yawning and scrolling through his phone like he always did. We were both dreading our first class, chemistry with Mr. Lopez. He was one of those teachers who genuinely cared about his subject. But let's be honest, no one really cared about balancing equations at 8 a.m. We got to class, and right away something was different. Mr. Lopez, who was never late, wasn't there yet. Instead, a substitute stood awkwardly at the front of the room, thumbing through a worn binder. He was tall, thin, probably in his mid-40s, and wearing an old-fashioned suit that didn't quite fit him right. But what stood out the most was his face. He had deep-set eyes, pale skin, and a sort of twitchy energy, like he was constantly watching everything around him. "Who's that?" Kyle whispered as we took our seats. "No idea," I muttered back, eyeing the man. Never seen him before. He introduced himself as Mr. Gray, but didn't offer much else. His voice was low and flat, and he barely looked at us when he spoke. He told us to open our textbooks and read chapter 8 silently. No explanation, no guidance, just read. It was weird, but hey, substitute teachers rarely cared. About 10 minutes into class, we heard the intercom crackle to life. I expected the usual announcements, something about lunch or sports, but instead, we heard, "Attention all staff and students, we are now in a lockdown. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Please lock all doors and stay silent." At first, no one moved. It took a second for the words to sink in. Then Mr. Gray sprang into action, faster than I thought possible for someone his age. He locked the door, drew the blinds, and motioned for us to gather in the corner of the room. "Phones off, no talking," he hissed, crouching down with us. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the occasional buzz of someone's phone vibrating. My heart was racing, my palms were sweaty, and my mind kept looping the same question: what the hell is going on? I glanced at Kyle, who was already texting under his desk. A second later, my phone buzzed with his message. "Kyle, heard it's a shooter in the East Wing." I stared at the screen, swallowing hard. The East Wing was where the main entrance and the office were located. We were in the science wing, a bit farther away, but that didn't make me feel any safer. Rachel, who sat a few desks away, whispered, "Did you guys see the sub in Mr. Duncan's class? He's wearing a trench coat." I thought that was weird. That immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I remembered seeing a tall man in a trench coat earlier in the hallway. At the time, I just brushed it off. But now it felt ominous. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling longer than the last. We could hear faint sounds echoing through the hallway, a door creaking, footsteps, something that sounded like a locker slamming shut. Every sound made us jump. About 20 minutes in, we heard footsteps approaching, slow, deliberate footsteps that grew louder and louder until they stopped right outside our door. My breath caught in my throat. Someone jiggled the handle. Mr. Gray stood up slowly, pressing his finger to his lips. He motioned for us to stay completely still. I was shaking, my entire body tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. Then came a loud bang, someone kicking the door hard. We all flinched, stifling gasps and screams. Mr. Gray didn't move from his spot, staring intently at the door, gripping a chair like he was ready to swing it at whoever burst in. The banging stopped, and after a few agonizing seconds, the footsteps moved away, echoing down the hall until they faded into silence. For the next hour, we sat there in absolute terror, Some of us cried quietly, others stared at the floor, their eyes wide with fear. Mr. Gray stayed alert the whole time, his eyes darting around the room like he was waiting for something to happen. Finally, the intercom crackled again. "Attention students and staff, the lockdown is over. Please remain in your classrooms until law enforcement has cleared each room." We let out a collective sigh of relief, but no one moved until the police arrived and knocked on our door. When they finally let us out, the hallways were swarming with officers, their guns drawn, their eyes sharp and scanning every corner. Later that day, we learned what had happened. The substitute teacher in Mr. Duncan's class, the one in the trench coat, had barricaded himself inside the classroom. He was armed and had been acting erratically all morning. He was subdued before anyone was hurt, but the entire school was left shaken. Here's the part that still gives me chills. Mr. Gray, our substitute, when the school tried to contact the agency that sent him, they had no record of a Mr. Gray. No substitute had been scheduled for our class that day. It's like he vanished into thin air. To this day, I don't know who he was or how he knew what to do during the lockdown, but one thing's for sure, without him, things could have ended a lot worse.
This story has haunted me for years, and every time I think about it, I get chills. I was a senior at Ridgeview High School, a fairly ordinary public school in a small suburban town. We didn't have much crime, and the worst things that usually happened were petty fights or vandalism. But what happened that Friday afternoon? It changed everything. It was late May, just before summer break, and we were all buzzing with excitement. It was a half day, and after lunch, we were supposed to be dismissed early so the teachers could have some sort of meeting. My friends and I had already made plans to hit the park and celebrate the long weekend. Our lunch period was loud and chaotic. Like always, I remember Justin, one of my classmates, standing at our table joking around, showing off some new sneakers he'd just gotten. He was one of those guys who got along with everyone, funny, outgoing, a bit of a class clown. Around 20 minutes into lunch, he excused himself to go to the bathroom. He left his backpack on the bench and walked off like it was nothing. And that was the last time any of us saw him. About 10 minutes later, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. We were all gathering our stuff when, suddenly, the principal's voice came over the intercom, sounding unusually tense. "Lockdown, lockdown, this is not a drill. All students and staff, secure your rooms immediately." At first, we were confused. A lockdown? On a half day? Most of us groaned, thinking it was a mistake or some sort of drill gone wrong. But our English teacher, Mrs. Campbell, wasn't taking any chances. She slammed the classroom door shut, locked it, turned off the lights, and ordered us to the corner of the room. Everyone obeyed, but you could feel the tension rising. We whispered to each other nervously, speculating. Rumors spread fast. Some said there was a gunman in the building. Others claimed there was a bomb threat. I glanced out the window and noticed flashing blue and red lights. At least 3 police cars had arrived. Mrs. Campbell took attendance, and that's when we realized Justin wasn't back yet. She frowned and tried texting him. No response. She called him, but it went straight to voicemail. Her face paled, but she kept her cool, telling us to stay calm. Minutes stretched into hours. We sat there in near silence, the only sounds being the occasional muffled announcement from police on bullhorns outside. Then, about an hour into the lockdown, we heard something, heavy footsteps running. Then, a loud crash, like something or someone hitting a locker hard. We all jumped, staring at the door, eyes wide in terror. Mrs. Campbell motioned for us to stay quiet, her own breathing ragged with fear, but nothing else happened. The hallway fell silent again. 2 agonizing hours later, we finally heard the all clear. Police officers escorted us out of the building in small groups. As we filed out, I noticed Justin's backpack still sitting on the bench in the cafeteria. It was untouched, exactly where he had left it before going to the bathroom. The rumors exploded that night. Everyone was talking about Justin, how he'd vanished during the lockdown, how his phone and backpack were found in the school but there was no trace of him. Security footage showed him entering the bathroom, but not coming out. It was like he'd disappeared into thin air. The police launched a full-scale investigation. They searched the entire school from top to bottom, bathrooms, maintenance rooms, crawl spaces, even the roof. Nothing. They brought in dogs, checked nearby woods, questioned every student and staff member. Weeks passed, then months. The search turned up nothing. Justin's family was devastated. They held vigils, printed flyers, even appeared on local news begging for information, but no leads ever came. That summer, something eerie happened. I was hanging out with a few friends when one of them, Lisa, said she had something to show us. She pulled out her phone and opened a Snapchat video she'd taken on the day of the lockdown, just a silly clip of her and some friends goofing around in the cafeteria before the alarm went off. But in the background of the video, at the far end of the cafeteria, we could see Justin. He was walking toward the bathroom. Nothing weird about that, except, just behind him, there was a shadow, a tall, dark shape like a person, but off. It was blurry and hard to make out, but it definitely wasn't a trick of the light, and none of us had noticed it before. We stared at the video in silence, goosebumps rising on our arms. The figure seemed to follow Justin toward the bathroom and then it was gone. Of course, we showed the video to the police, but they dismissed it as inconclusive. They had no logical explanation, but they didn't exactly believe in anything paranormal. That fall, the school quietly removed Justin's name from attendance rolls. His desk was cleared out. His family moved away within a year. It was like he'd never existed. But I remember, we all do. Sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet place, I think about Justin. I think about that dark figure on the video, and I wonder, what if it wasn't just a random disappearance? What if something was waiting for him in that bathroom? I guess we'll never know.
This story comes from my cousin Jake, and it's one of those tales that's burned into my mind. Jake's not the type to exaggerate, if anything. He's annoyingly logical. So when he told me what happened during a lockdown at his high school in Pennsylvania, I knew it was serious. Jake went to a school in a small rural town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing much ever happens. A few hundred students, old brick buildings, surrounded by miles of forest and farmland. Their biggest worry was usually whether the Friday night football game would get rained out. But all of that changed in the spring of his junior year. It started on what seemed like a normal Thursday. The weather was nice, warm, blue skies, a gentle breeze that carried the smell of freshly cut grass. Jake said he remembered the good mood around campus. Seniors were buzzing about prom, underclassmen were making summer plans, and teachers were a bit more laid back than usual. Fifth period had just started. Jake was in history class, bored out of his mind, doodling in his notebook while his teacher droned on about the Revolutionary War. Suddenly, the fire alarm went off. At first, everyone thought it was a drill. The teacher sighed, told everyone to line up, and started herding them toward the door. But just as Jake and his classmates reached the hallway, the intercom crackled. "Attention, lockdown. This is not a drill. Teachers, secure your classrooms immediately." Total confusion. Students looked at each other, unsure whether to keep evacuating or go back into the classroom. Some teachers were shouting conflicting orders. Back inside. No. Head to the exits. Chaos. Jake's teacher made a split-second decision to get everyone back into the classroom. She slammed the door shut, locked it, and turned off the lights. Everyone sat on the floor, their backs against the wall, whispering anxiously. Was it a bomb threat? A shooter? People were asking. No one knew. For about 30 minutes, nothing happened. Then, the whispers started from students whose classroom windows faced the parking lot. "There's someone out there," a girl named Hannah whispered, her voice shaking. She was pressed against the wall, peeking through the blinds. Jake crawled over and looked too. And that's when he saw it. A figure, tall, lean, wearing a mask, was just standing at the edge of the parking lot, facing the school. But this wasn't some Halloween clown mask or a ski mask. Jake said it was one of the creepiest things he'd ever seen, a homemade papier-mâché mask. Eerily human-like but with exaggerated features. The eyes were too large, the mouth too wide. It looked wrong. The figure just stood there, not moving, not doing anything, just watching. Minutes passed. It didn't move. Every time Jake looked, it was in the exact same spot, like a statue. But something about its posture, rigid, tense, made it clear this wasn't a joke. Then, out of nowhere, the figure started walking. Slow, steady steps across the parking lot, straight toward the school. That's when panic really set in. Students in nearby classrooms screamed. Teachers shouted for everyone to stay down. Jake's classroom was near the main entrance. He said he could hear the doors rattling as the figure tried them one by one. Locked. It moved along the building, testing every door. At one point, it stopped right in front of Jake's classroom. Everyone held their breath. The handle jiggled violently. Then, bang. A loud thud as the masked figure pounded on the door. Another bang, and another. Then, silence. The figure moved on. It circled the building for another 10 minutes, testing doors, occasionally banging, before vanishing from sight. Police arrived soon after, swarming the parking lot, weapons drawn. But by the time they swept the area, the figure was gone. Security footage showed the figure appearing in the parking lot out of nowhere. No car, no bike, no indication of how it got there. And, creepier still, no footage of it leaving. One frame it was there, the next it was gone. Jake said the school was in a state of shock for weeks. Rumors flew. Some said it was a failed kidnapping attempt. Others whispered about a local cult. Some kids thought it was a prank, but deep down, no one really believed that. A week later, the school received an anonymous letter. It was simple, a single sentence typed on a sheet of plain white paper. Next time, I'll get in. The police never caught the person. No arrests, no suspects, and no one ever came forward claiming responsibility. Jake told me that even now, years later, some teachers and students refuse to talk about it. And every time the school does a lockdown drill, you can feel the tension. The memory of that day still lingers. Sometimes Jake wonders if it was just some lunatic playing a sick game, but other times, especially when he dreams about that mask, he's not so sure. Lockdowns are meant to keep us safe, but as these stories show, sometimes even the best safety measures can't stop true horror. Stay alert, stay safe, and thanks for listening.